Rowley, if you have to say where you are ranked in terms of popularity from 1 to 200, where would you put yourself?
I recently watched the first film in one of my favorite movie series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. There's so much to like about these films and so much to say, but today I want to focus on one underlying theme throughout the first movie, an important lesson that will be of great use to you and would have been of great use to me had I learned it sooner in life. So if that's of interest to you, then stay tuned. This channel exists to encourage you to continue to do good through lessons that are primarily rooted in biblical and Stoic principles. The basic plot of the film follows Greg Heffley through his adventures/misadventures through middle school, 6th grade in particular. He has his ups as well as many downs, and as I mentioned before, there's a recurring reason as to why Greg has such trouble getting through school and finding any sort of success in what he's striving for. And it's because what he views as success is ultimately unattainable in the long run, and even in the short term, it's not even worth it. The opening of the film shows Greg's dream of being famous. That's why he claims to even be writing in his diary, so people can read it instead of him having to answer people's questions later on in life. In the first scene at school, Greg notices Rowley walking into class sporting his new serape, I believe it was called, from Guatemala. Yeah, Rowley was really trying to pull off a Joseph cosplay, rolling up in the coat of many colors, and Greg was visibly embarrassed to know Rowley or even be associated with him at this moment. But he shouldn't be. First of all, contrary to how the film portrays Greg's classmates, most people, let alone middle schoolers, don't notice other people, in some respects anyway, for they have enough of their own concerns at any given time. Most people would barely even notice something that some may perceive as out of the ordinary or even embarrassing. That said, even if the entire class thought it was weird what Rowley was wearing, and therefore didn't approve of Greg because he was his friend or something, who cares? Later in the day, Greg goes on to ask Rowley, if you had to say where you were ranked in terms of popularity from 1 to 200, where would you put yourself? What actually is a great fact of life is that you don't have to be popular, well-known, or perceived as cool in order to do great and meaningful things. In fact, being infatuated with wanting to appear cool or popular can very easily turn into pride and hold you back from doing the most good you could be doing. I'm sure most people have some part of them that would like to be well-known. And this is common because there is an innate desire within everyone to feel and be important. That said, it's the infatuation and hyper-focus on the fame itself that is the main issue. Rather seek to improve the world in some way and never get your due recognition than to be famous for something stupid.
For doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else, Patrick, this trophy's for you!
I hope after even just these 3 examples that I've mentioned, Greg's main issue has become apparent. He is overly concerned with what other people think, with how he is viewed in the eyes of the world, and that is a recipe for a terrible life. The lesson then is to live not solely to impress, but rather to be and do your best. You like that? It rhymed, kind of. Does that technically rhyme? No, maybe not. Either way, it almost rhymed. Care very much about others, but nothing of what they think. And if you don't follow that rule, then let's see what happens. Let Greg be the example here. Getting crushed is better than being seen with that freak job. Trust me, you can't recover from social suicide, Greg states after running away from a more so nerdy girl. For starters, if anyone you are close to views you in a worse light simply for interacting with a certain individual, they probably are not a good friend. Now, there are exceptions, but just in general. In Greg's mind, he doesn't want to be seen with Angie because she's different and is somewhat an outcast, you could say. But even in a different scenario, let's say there was a kid at your school that had some insane ideologies, or not even school, it could be anywhere like your job or what have you. Is the solution to never interact with them? Well, of course not. Even Jesus interacted with the sinners of his time, the tax collectors and others like them. It has to be clarified, though, that like with Jesus, when you interact or hang out with people that are not yet on the right path, influence them. Don't hang out with them to be influenced by them. All too often, you see people who are on the right path and bettering themselves and their lives and are really having a positive impact on the world, they begin to be too friendly with and into the ideologies and social norms of another individual or group. And they eventually join those degenerates, or fine, just ignorant people in some cases, on their dark path to, yeah, you guessed it, the dark side. I'm just kidding, kind of. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Now, I understand this is a convoluted idea, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. But as it stands now, I'd argue that if you are following Christ and are on a good road, do interact with people of different views, but mostly to influence and show love to them, not to be influenced by them. Now, that's definitely not to say that there will never be anything you can learn from someone with opposing views, for that is certainly not the case. But I'd caution you to just make sure that the wisdom you have is not replaced with worldly knowledge. Yes, be friendly with people, but not with their poisonous ideas. Blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. Psalms 1:1. Now that is more of a side point, but it's an important one nonetheless. One of the more well-known scenes of the movie is when Greg is walking down the stairs after he gets outside the school, and Rowley is not far behind him, and he yells to him,
Hey, Greg! You want to come over and play?
Now, this would be pretty difficult to brush off in the moment, I concede. Because fair enough, it's kind of, I guess, cringe. But in all seriousness, who cares? I mean, if your friend said something like that, or even that exactly, and some other kids thought it was cringe, oh, it's weird, then let them think that. Literally, what difference does it make at all, let alone in the long run? I already know there are a subgroup of people that would say I'm setting you up to fail high school, or to use Greg's words, to commit social suicide. But that's anything but true. People think the key is to fit in, to go along to get along. But even if that works for some time, it doesn't in the long run. No matter how cool you may seem or be, no matter how much you conform to the pattern of the world, people are never satisfied fully. So it's not worth it.
Good.
Meh.
What do you mean, meh?
Meh.
If the thing you are striving for with so much effort is ultimately unattainable anyway, by trying to gain the approval of the world, why continue seeking that? If you live for people's acceptance, you'll die from their rejection. Rather, live to do good and to be a light in your own way, and let the cards fall where they may, and let degenerates, or even decent people, think what they want of you, just that you do your best. Love is never wasted, for its value does not rest upon reciprocity. The point being, if you're striving to do good, you can always succeed at that. Even if the person you're doing good to doesn't want to accept it or learn anything from it, you've still done your part. Now, in regards to this example, I will say, to be clear, social awareness is a good thing, but make sure you're acting out of that and not self-consciousness. Social awareness would be not interrupting someone, for example, because they're speaking, whereas self-consciousness would be not joyfully greeting your friend because you're afraid someone might notice you or look or think it's weird. My mom told me to just be myself and people will like me, says Rowley. I'd change that just a little bit. If you be yourself and try your best to do good, the right people will like you. Again, the goal shouldn't be to earn anyone's approval, really, apart from God's. But you can be sure that if you do good, you'll attract good people. This is actually one of the mirrors in Dennis Prager's 3 mirrors theory, and to quickly explain it, it's the physical mirror, first of all, that obviously reveals physically who you are. The mirror of the mind is writing. If you don't write clearly, then you probably don't think clearly. And the third mirror is the mirror of your character, which is the type of people you attract and bring into your life. There's a scene where Rowley and Greg are looking through a yearbook of Roderick's from when he was in middle school. And Greg states, "These people aren't nobodies," in reference to the class favorites. And to that, I'd say no one is a nobody, for everyone is somebody to someone. And let's say, for example, there is an individual that doesn't have any great friends or even great family members. Every life is intrinsically valuable, so no matter what, no one is a nobody. And to be clear, I'm not saying don't make something of yourself, but the point being, every individual is intrinsically valuable. That said, continue to work on yourself. Greg eventually opted to check out the extracurricular classes and opportunities, and as he's looking at the board, he states, it's pretty obvious these kids are doing these extracurricular classes just to get in the yearbook. Yeah, the lack of self-awareness with that quote is pretty appalling, I guess, or whatever the lesser extent of that is. Angie suggests to Greg that he join the club that makes the paper, like the newspaper of sorts for the school, and Greg says, well, I can't be on the paper because I'm going to be in the paper a lot. It would be a conflict of interest. And that did turn out to be true, but not in the way Greg intended. It goes to show also that what you think you want isn't always as glamorous as it may seem. And sometimes on your way to attaining a goal, who you become or what you have to go through is not worth it. At some point, there's a video shown in class, and it's meant to be a motivational video, I guess, and it's actually pretty funny. This guy is sitting in a chair in the computer lab, and a couple people, the quote-unquote popular kids, or not kids, but you know what I'm saying, walk past him and say, oh, he's so unpopular, I wouldn't want to be him, you. And he's like, oh, why does no one like me? And Brock, I think is it Brock Brannigan P.I.? Something like that, some like outlandish name.
Brock Brannigan P.I.? What are you doing here?
Is like, well, maybe they just don't know how awesome you really are. So then the quote unquote not cool guy goes and starts breakdancing, and then the popular guys are like, oh, you should hang out with us now, something like that. And I'd say this goes to show, when you do try your best to impress people and gain their friendship that way, that's a recipe for nothing good. You don't want to be loved or appreciated solely for an ability you have, but rather for who you are, the choices you make. It's not who I am underneath, but what I do, that defines me.
Bruce?
These two lame people only liked the green shirt guy because he could breakdance. How superficial of them. Look, it is good to have some skills, or even a skill. Of course it is. But again, what you can do shouldn't be placed higher or in a more significant light than what you choose to do and who you choose to be. Another side note of sorts, but again, it's important. And it does kind of tie into this whole how people view me issue. Joshy says to respect your parents and follow your dreams, states Rowley. And then Greg answers with, then Joshy must get beaten up a lot. Haha, laugh track. Play the laugh track. Yep, there we go. Yep, funny, good one. First off, is someone that gets bullied necessarily in the wrong or uncool? Well, no. I mean, let's even say that this Joshy guy did get ridiculed or even beaten up. Okay, anyway. Let's remember that Jesus, who did no wrong, was killed. Those who do right often get persecuted. Don't let that deter you. And also, more importantly, watch my other video on that topic here. I'm just kidding, not more important. But anyway, yeah, check that out after this video, of course. Greg is not thrilled about Manny calling him Bubby. And fair enough, in terms of good nicknames, that one is not high on the list, or even on the list at all. But in any case, Greg mentions how he doesn't want anyone to hear Manny calling him that. This is where this idea gets tricky again, because yes, Greg shouldn't care what others think. I mean, I hope that that's clear. That's what the whole video is about. However, demanding respect is necessary sometimes. There comes a point where certain actions are no longer productive for you due to your age or life season. For example, I didn't dress up for Halloween last year because I simply think it's not for me anymore. I want to respect myself in that way and elicit the respect of other respectable people. Whereas in years past, I did dress up, to be clear. That said, if it came to it that I thought it would be fun and didn't diminish myself in my own eyes, I'd surely dress up for Halloween again. All that to say, do demand respect for yourself, but not merely to impress or satisfy the desires of others. In a very important scene in the film, Greg throws a football at Rowley while he's riding a tricycle of sorts. I think they actually called it a big wheels, but it's essentially a tricycle. Rowley's arm ultimately breaks in the fall. This in turn gains him quite the popularity. Greg notices this and then fakes an injury to hopefully gain some attention for himself. This doesn't end up happening for him. Again, the infatuation and incessant striving to get attention or to be viewed as someone significant in the eyes of the world often leads to you doing some outlandish stuff that you'll most likely look back on and regret. Though I'd say the more clearly ascertainable theme or lesson of this movie overall has to do with Greg's redemption and the reconciliation between him and Rowley, it's fitting that the climax of this story is, yes, about reconciliation, but it's also about Greg no longer caring what people think. Not only that, but realizing how meaningless most of the things he and the school have concerned themselves with up till then are. As you know, there are a few teenagers that Rowley and Greg have some history with that make their way onto the school property and force Rowley to eat the nasty cheese. But as Coach Malone comes out and scares the high schoolers off, all the rest of the middle school people in Greg and Rowley's class, make it outside and see that Rowley has eaten the cheese. And as soon as Patty's about to make a big deal of it, Greg, he says, no, I ate it actually. And I did you all a favor. I just wanted to prove how ridiculous this whole thing is. This whole school is like, we prop up these certain friend groups, and we think that we're so cool at this specific lunch table, and we have this cheese touch thing, and it's all meaningless. Like, it's not important. That's essentially what he says in a nutshell. And he did the right thing. He ultimately did get rejected by the masses for doing what's right. But that's all right. Again, if you live for people's acceptance, you'll die from their rejection. And he no longer was doing that. That said, he wasn't rejected by everyone, for he had just regained Rowley's friendship. This goes to show also that by caring what others think, you hold yourself back from doing good to others. Like with what I mentioned earlier about the seemingly trivial examples, like, you might not greet your friend because you might think people are watching you or something. If Greg hadn't decided, in spite of what he may have felt, to act selflessly and not care what others thought, this tale would have had a terrible ending. This whole idea and lesson is very pertinent to, I'm sure, many people, but me specifically. Like I said, I could have used it throughout high school, well, even some middle school too. I, in a way, was like Greg. I cared too much of what people thought of me. But in my case, it more so held me back from things, as opposed to me making a fool of myself by striving too hard to seem cool or get attention, like in Greg's case. I was more reserved than I should have been, simply because I did not want to appear weird or uncool. Well, both those things are subjective, to be clear. Anyway, I remember one time in particular, it was right after the basketball season had ended. Me and the rest of the team went to the empty gym just to mess around and play some ball. I pulled off some of my best moves of the season, just messing around, realizing sadly it was no longer even the season. I hadn't even realized what was going on while I was doing it, but after the fact, I realized that in the back of my mind, I suppose I just knew that there was no one else in the gym watching, so I was just being myself and really trying my best, not really caring if, my teammates might think I'm weird. It's like, well, there's not a huge crowd, so I don't really care right now. It was only then that I realized how much more I could have done and gotten out of the basketball season and life in general had I not cared what others thought. So, don't end up like Greg before his redemption, and don't end up like me before mine. And if you're in the position of either of us, pre-redemption, then redeem yourself today and don't care about what people think anymore. Live not solely to impress, but rather to be and do your best. Care much about others, but nothing of what they think. For if your goal is to be popular or appear cool, or simply not appear weird or uncool, it's a recipe for a terrible life, because it will consume you, ruin friendships and your life, and not even be worth it. Like in Greg's case, it will hold you back from doing good to others, like what could have happened to Greg had he not taken the fall for Rowley. as well as other things. And it will keep you from experiencing life to the fullest, like in my case, in high school. Don't let the fear of man hold you back from all that you could and should be. The wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are bold as a lion. Proverbs 28, verse 1. Thank you so much for watching. I sincerely hope that this helps you in some way. So apply it today and wherever, bro, why can't I talk? Apply it today or whenever and wherever applicable. Remember to treat others the way that you want to be treated and to love God and love your neighbor, and therefore you will be your best self. Thank you again for watching, and as always, it's